here it lists the different parts of light on an object. Now, this sounds super complicated, but it's really not terrible. So we have a highlight, which is the lightest part of a painting. We have the light side, which is darker than the highlight. We have a shadow. We have a core shadow. We have a reflected shadow. And we have a cast shadow. Now, the cast shadow is generally the darkest part of a painting. We will use this a lot for what we're painting. Not that you have to remember the different parts, but just know that they're there. This at the bottom here is called a value scale. So a value 1 is white, a value 9 is black, and there's all those steps in between. Now, generally with the painting, we don't have to get super complicated. Our eyes see way more values than our paint can produce. So part of what we are doing is that we are simplifying what our eyes can see. So to have these value steps is helpful to simplify what we're seeing. Okay. Now we use value in art in two ways. Can I control the slide? Okay. So the composition is one thing that we use value for. So I thought about bringing up this last time, but I decided it would be better to do it with value. Now, when I am first starting a painting, I will, before I even start drawing, actually, I will think about my composition, how I want the things arranged on the painting. And that's not just about where objects go, it's about how light and dark they are, because those values make it look interesting. So this symbol that I have on the slide is a balanced composition. It's balancing the positive space and the negative space. So that's what we use. So when I'm first starting a painting, I'll make little sketches, and they're not going to be very good. I'm just planning my positive space and my negative space to make my composition interesting. Now, we didn't do that for this project because whoever took the photograph that we were using already considered that. So we don't have to do it. I just want you to be aware in the future as you're planning your own paintings, that might be something you want to do. Yes.
Want that composition standard in your painting? Or are there rules you put on third?
Good question. So the question is, do you always center your elements in your painting? And the answer is no, probably not. So a very common design rule in art is the rule of thirds. So a lot of people will cut their canvas, cut their canvas into 3 sections vertically and horizontally. That kind of makes a grid. And they try instead to line it up in one of those cross sections of the grid, so it's off-centered. It just feels more comfortable to us. It kind of gives the paintings more direction. So in a still life, if you notice in, let's see. Oh, this will work. So in here, if you'll notice how I have these drawings arranged, they are not centered. And in this one of this flower pot with a pear, it's giving it direction to have it off-centered. It makes it more interesting than if it was just in the middle. Now, I hesitate to say that anything is a rule in art because in art, rules are made to be broken. But my rule again is you learn the rules well enough that if you ever break them, you're breaking them on purpose. If you can't give a good reason why you are breaking a rule, don't do it. That's kind of what I go with. Okay, so composition is king. You'll also hear artists say this a lot. If your composition or your arrangement of your painting isn't interesting, your painting won't be interesting. So a lot of artists put a lot of effort in their planning of how a painting is arranged. Now, again, we haven't had to do too much of that for this painting because it was already done in the photograph, but it is very good to know and good practice to be thinking about how you are arranging things. Okay, the second thing that we do with value is it helps us again to have our objects, our elements of our painting to be correct. So for this sphere, if one of these values was off, it might feel different. If the background was a lighter color, you wouldn't see the ball as well because it would kind of blend in. So these are things we use to practice to get things right. So what we'll be doing today is we'll be painting a black and white version, a small black and white version of our painting so that we can figure out our values. Now this is good because it will help you practice for one. It will help you, it's your first experience with paint, so, and not dealing with color, excuse me, in addition is helpful when you're first starting. And it will help you figure out how to paint it accurately by figuring out the values. Now, a good rule of thumb is if it feels like light, the values are correct. If it doesn't feel like light, something is off. Now, it does take practice to see value correctly, especially if you're seeing things in color. That's why we have, in your reference pictures, we have the black and white versions. Now, keep in mind, some of those images are a little bit dark, so refer to your color ones also. But that will help you see the values correctly if you're seeing it in black and white, because it takes practice to see value in color. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so this is what we are doing today. These are my versions of the paintings that we're doing. So these are the value studies. Let's see, let's go to the iPad camera. Is that all right? Excuse me. So before we can start painting, we need to get our supplies set up. So I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. Okay. Okay, so you'll take your frame and just take off the plastic. Now on the back, you just pop up these little tabs. Be careful because they're a little bit sharp. And we're going to take out this back part. And you won't need this paper. We're going to take the glass out and put it on top. Now you can save this frame for later because this is the perfect size that we can frame our finished paintings. Now, if you remember last time I mentioned that we don't put glass over oil paintings. The paint, even over years and years, needs to breathe. So we just don't put glass over it. So you might want to take this part off just because it kind of gets in the way, this stand piece. But you want the cardboard on the back. So I'm just going to rip that off. And now we have packing tape available, I believe. And what we'll do is you'll take a piece of tape and you're going to tape all four sides. So I'm going to just pull this about the length of the frame. And what you're doing is you're taping the glass and the cardboard together. I'll push this up so you can see. Now, you want as much painting surface on your palette as you can. So don't get it, you want it enough to hold it, but don't take up too much of your space. So I'm just going to cover about right here. And just wrap it around. You're covering all the sharp edges of the glass. And if it's not perfect, it's okay. It's going to get dirty anyways. See, I already cut my finger a little bit. Thank you. Okay, if you guys want to go ahead and get your palettes taped, this will take a couple of minutes. So we'll do this and then let me know on the chat when you guys are ready and I'll show you the next thing we need to prepare. Okay?
Kaylee, would you say something for us?
Sorry, what was that? It was a little quiet. Could you say it one more time?
We're working on our sound here. Hold on.
Do you guys need this? Okay. Oh. Do you think we could pull up the chat so we can see if they say they're done? Richard had a question, but I couldn't. Okay. Wait, so as soon as you guys tell me you're ready, then we'll move on. No rush or anything. So this is the palette that you will be working with for the whole class. And it is obviously not anything fancy, but working on glass is the best way to work with oil paint because you can scrape it off. And the reason I didn't keep the white paper in between is because a neutral color will help you see your colors more accurately. If you have white, your colors will look duller as you mix them on your palette. So just having this kind of neutral color, to me, is helpful. So. Mm-hmm. That's tricky. And are you guys ready? Did you get yours all taped? Okay, is everybody ready? Great. Okay, it's looking to me like everyone's ready, so I will move on. So the next thing we need to get ready is you have a jar and a bottle of Gamasol. You guys see that? Woo. So what we're gonna do, woo, the jar like exploded. Okay, so we're just gonna put the Gamasol in the jar. Very simple. Just be careful when you open it. It kind of smells strong. We'll just kind of see. I wouldn't put the whole thing, maybe about half. I would probably put about half. Okay. Okay. I can get my, there are some scissors right here if you guys need. Okay, so yeah, I used probably about half. And you want me to just keep going? Okay. So this has two purposes. The first is cleaning paintbrushes, which is really the main thing we do with it. The second is it can thin your paint a little. Sometimes we put it on the canvas and it's very thick because it's oil paint. So if we add just a little bit to it, it just thins it a little. We don't want to add a lot to it because it's not watercolor, right? So it just can make it a little looser, makes it glide on the canvas a little easier. I'm just gonna throw this away. Yeah, they kind of pop. I didn't expect that to happen. Okay, so when I'm painting, I have my jar of Gamasol. Now there are different chemicals that you can use for this. They try to make some for artists that's not as smelly. This is one of them that's less smelly, but you know, you can still smell it. And then I think we are ready to get out our brushes and our paints, but let's just get out the white and the black today.
Can you talk us through about that, what you're doing again? Because, yeah, we missed part of that. The first part, what did you put in the jar?
Okay, so we are putting the Gamasol. Sorry, I don't know when it cut out. So we have this jar of Gamasol. We're gonna put around half probably in your jar.
Around
Because
half.
we're gonna use this to clean our brushes and to slightly thin our paint when needed, I should say. So after you get your gamma salt in your jar, so you want your jar close by your palette because you'll be, dipping in it regularly. Then you can get out your brushes and your palette knife. So I would open up your palette knife and get that out. Now, we're working on a small canvas today, so we don't need to have our huge brushes. I would probably get this one here. This is called a flat. It has a flat edge. Now, this brush is good for making hard edges. And I would also get out this one. This is a filbert. It's got a more rounded tip. It makes a little bit softer edges. And I would get out a few of your small ones because you might want them, they're more for detailing. Not that we'll be doing tons of detail today, but while we're working on a small canvas, we probably want a couple of smaller brushes. So I pulled out 8, 9, 2, and 4 is what I pulled out.
8, 9, 2, 4. Can you pause for a few minutes? We are a little bit behind. For 2 moments. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm just having a hard time hearing you today, Richard.
Turn it down, third play.
Okay, so it's not like a set rule that you have to use these brushes. One thing that will come with time as you are painting is you'll get comfortable with each brush and what kind of marks it makes. Now that's just something that comes with practice. So if you notice, your brushes are very stiff right now. So what the stores do is they cover them in wax to keep their shape. So just dip it in your gamma sol. It'll kind of dissolve that wax, kind of push it down. Let me put that right there. So as I was pushing it in, it kind of broke up that wax. So now it's soft. So just dry it off. And now it's soft. Okay. So you want to do that with each of your brushes that you're going to use. Oh, yes. Yes, we can pause for a bit. So just go to the point of getting your gamma sol out, get your brushes out, and dip them in to get the wax off. And then we'll wait here for a bit until everybody's ready. No, the black will stay on there. That's just, yeah, flexible. Yeah, I had teachers who would take little jars of water and they'd test them out before they'd buy the brushes. Because professional brushes are very, very, very expensive. So they always wanted to make sure they were getting a good one. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. They just need to be flexible. Yes, it is. They try to make it a more safe type of paint thinner for artists because it's I know it's a chemical base. In the olden days, they did use like paint thinner, and obviously the fumes and stuff from that's not super great for you. So these are healthier options. Gamma sol is a pretty popular one because it doesn't have the odor. I like it for that reason. Oh yeah. I'm talking a lot. Cokeville, are you ready to go? Thumbs up. Cameron, are you ready as well? Or close?
We're ready and Thane.
Okay, so our sound is very quiet, so we don't get feedback. So if you say something, say it really super loud for me. Cameron, did you say you were ready?
What'd you say? Janet? I don't know, we are ready.
Okay, yeah. The text, I think, the chat box is better so we can read it just because our sound is quiet. Okay, so the next things we need to do is we need to get out our white and our black paint from our paint set. Everybody should have access to a razor blade as well. So I'm just going to show you how I set up my paint on my palette. And we'll go over this again next time when we pull out color. But for now, what I do is I line up my white to black on the left, and then I do my colors across the top. And I usually do red, blue, yellow. So I am a believer in a limited palette, meaning just a few colors. But today we're just working with black and white. So you'll probably start with about this. It's always, well, my teachers always said you need to make sure you have a lot of paint, but I would argue that you just have enough paint as you need. You don't want to mix too much and waste it. So I put my white and my black. You can always get more when you need to. Oh yeah, there's my black. Yeah, about an inch is a good way to look at it. Now, just remember, you can always pull out more if you need it. So what we're going to do, in my palette at home, I have several grays that I buy pre-mixed just because it's easier for me because I'm using them all the time. But for this class, we have white and we have black. So we're going to take half of that and half of the white, and we're going to put them together, and we're going to mix a middle gray to start working with. So my idea is you have your white and your black and a middle to start from, and then you can adjust slowly from there. So when you're mixing paint, it's kind of like a folding motion. You're not stirring it. It isn't soup. You fold it in, and it kind of keeps it in a nice pile. You see that? Yeah. So you I'm tipping my knife up a little, so it's kind of resting on the edge, and you just fold and push down as you get to the middle. So it's just like this folding motion. You're pressing down into the palette, and you just keep going till it's nice and mixed. Any questions on that? Okay, pause. So just so you know, on the camera, what I'm seeing, it looks darker than what I'm seeing in real life here. So you should just have a gray that's kind of in the middle.
That's beautiful.
Okay. So let me do that again. I'm just going to scrape this So when you have your gray, you'll put it kind of in the middle. That way you have light, medium, dark. So I'm going to show you again. I'll take some black. I'll take some white. Because I'm going for a middle gray, I'm using equal amounts. Now I'm tipping my palette knife.
Put it in the middle.
And then I kind of scrape with the edge and then push down from different directions. So scrape with the edge and then push down.
So is she making a fourth one now? Yes, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
a lighter.
I'm just repeating the mixing process so everyone can see it again. I'm technically mixing the same gray.
Added white.
No, she did black. No, she did black and white. Yeah. Yeah, and then she's doing her equal person.
Yeah, so I'm using equal parts white and black just to make a middle gray.
Okay, so the same gray she just
No,
did?
I think she's just doing the first one. Yeah. Oh, it doesn't make a wash.
It kind of takes a little practice to get that folding motion down. But what it does is it helps keep the paint more together in a pile instead of spreading it all over your palette. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's okay to like use up your palette and make a mess. That's totally fine. But you kind of want to keep it together in a pile so you're not wasting any. So now I'm scraping it onto my palette knife and I'm just putting it. So I have my light, medium, dark. Now when I'm done with my palette knife, I'll just take a paper towel and just wipe it off. Yes, we only have 3 colors right now.
I have 5.
That's good. You'll be done.
Mine's gonna be green.
So when you are ready and you have that mixed, if you want to take the razor blade, now be careful that you don't cut yourself. But because this is glass, it's really easy to just scrape it off. Now, if you run out, you can always mix more. So when you're ready, you just take the razor blade, scrape it off, and then just again wipe it on the paper towel. Just be careful not to cut yourself.
This works pretty slick.
So if you're ready to do that, be careful.
Tricia, where are you from?
I live in Edna right now.
Okay.
I just use a paper towel. Yeah.
Are you coming from Alpine Theater?
Excuse me.
So I work at the workforce center. The workforce center. Well, yeah.
Okay,
And stuff like
I'm
that.
going to give you guys a few minutes. Just type okay when you guys are ready with this step.
We have to, like I have my kids die. You know, did you know the way they know the Roberts that live in that?
Yeah.
When I live in their apartment in the back of their shop, or they have the shop. It's now Salon 89.
Oh.
So I live in the back.
I don't want to take too much time.
Easy access.
Okay, good thing is ready.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
My son-in-law is.
Yes.
Dealing with social. So they said, hey, you're looking for a place to rent.
To grab a pen.
How you get them around here?
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, there's, and if you do that.
Perfect. We're probably not for this one.
No, no, we can always squirt more.
Yeah.
And there's a question that says, are we going to use small canvases tonight? Yes. We will use our small ones.
Oh, small? I thought she was.
Yeah.
I thought she said it, all right.
Small.
Yeah, okay.
Well, we had a few extra canvases. If you didn't want to do the small one, you could use the bigger one, as long as you make sure you have a canvas available for your final painting.
She says you can use a bigger one.
But yeah, she would have another.
Yeah, you have another one. You're gonna probably don't-
Yeah, so if you really want to, you could use the bigger one. The reason I do the smaller ones is because it's faster, you use less paint.
So we would have.
I'll bring one. Okay.
You have two?
Cute.
Yeah. There's enough for everybody.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Actually, we'll be one short, but they'll be sending supplies.
I'll bring you one.
Yeah,
Yes, I can get some too.
well, yeah, mine. I
They'll,
guess-
they'll send supplies for
Mine's in
my
Arabic.
Okay. So she'll have supplies next time.
Do you have to bring more stuff?
We have to keep it here.
Oh, okay.
That's right.
So they don't let us go home without this? Really?
They want to keep
What,
it till
how,
they're back.
what is she,
Oh.
she says we can take it home and work on it, so what does she want us to do?
I think that was just for the sketching.
I think it
Oh.
was too.
Yeah, they specifically told me. Yeah, I saw that on your thing.
Well, Janet said that when we signed up.
Okay, I'm gonna move on just because in the interest of time. So what you're gonna do, if you want to draw out your picture again, this should be really fast. The goal of this painting is not for it to be like, this is perfect. The goal is to figure out what value you will paint things for your final painting. So this is my version, and I spent a lot more detail on this than you need to do. Oh,
Yeah.
our camera's upside down. Okay, so I did a lot more detail on this one than you need to do. But the idea is that you figure out what colors, what values you're gonna do. So we're using the small canvas. Okay, this is a 4x6 canvas.
There's no 4x6s in there?
There is, do you want one of those?
Oh, yeah.
She said it didn't matter though.
I think I might-
Okay, so if you want to use your pencil and draw on your canvas, you can. Generally, you won't use just a normal pencil because it's not archival. It will just, it won't, it's not super good for the oil paint. But this is just a study. So I don't want you to stress too much. This is an experiment. You're figuring out values. So for example, I'm just gonna put a little version on here to follow, just so I can figure out my values. It is very light. Don't worry about this part. You guys should have already drawn. So I'm just putting it on here just to have something to follow. Okay, so when I am painting, it is usually a good idea to start from the background and work your way forward. So notice, for example, I didn't even paint the full background on this because I really didn't need to. I figured out what I needed without painting the whole background. So that's to save time. So you can use a little bit bigger brush. Like I said before, this will make more hard edges and this will make softer edges. Okay. So I'm going to look at my reference, my picture, or you can look at the photos of this. And I'm going to say, I need kind of a middle value. So I have a middle value to start. Now I'm looking, yeah, it's just the middle value, the gray, the middle gray. Now that's actually pretty close to where I want it. So I'm just going to paint it on, right? Again, this does not have to be lovely. I just want you to get used to your paintbrushes. I want you to figure out what values to paint things and just kind of get a feel for painting. Now, if you're feeling like it's too thick and you're using a lot of paint, just touch it in your gamma sol just a little bit. It doesn't need a lot, and it just kind of makes it smoother. I don't know if you can see that. It makes it a little smoother, and it makes it glide on a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to pause here. Now, if you finish this step, just keep going. Just start painting your picture in black and white. Okay, but I will say a few more things in a minute.
No.
Yeah, you don't want to spend too much time on the drawing because then it just takes up a lot of your time, right? Yes, so if you paint the background first, what that does is when you're putting your, we kind of start from background to foreground, and that just helps your edges be more clean because then you're not like chiseling in, trying to not go outside the edges. Excuse me.
It looks black to me.
But see, she did.
Depending on what your picture is, for this one,
She's using the gray.
I use that middle value gray because that matches about right here. Now I will add, so I'm going to say this so they can see. I use the middle gray that we mixed for here. Now on this side, I might add a little bit of black just to make that a little darker because it does change in our reference. Yes. So that's the next part that I was going to say. Excuse me. I'm getting over a cough from a long time ago.
Kayle, is there anyone there?
I'm here.
So, we only have 10, 11 people here today. So it might take us a little bit longer to process this point. So, we totally get that part where you started tasting.
Sorry, I'm having a really hard time hearing you. So I just quickly drew the picture that we're painting. Nothing fancy, just throwing it on the canvas. Now I'm using the middle value on this painting. So you're starting with your background and you're wanting to paint the value that's your background. Does that make sense?
Mid-size. The mid-size. Yes, it did.
So remember on the slideshow, we have this value chart. So basically on our palette, we have white, we have black, and we have a middle. And I'm guessing it's probably about a 6. So that's our base colors that we're working from. So as you paint, you're looking at the section you're painting and you're saying, what value is this? So if we start with our background first, I'm saying our background is pretty close to this middle value that we mixed. So I'm just using that and painting it on the background. So if it's too thick, when you're painting it on the canvas, just touch your brush just a little bit in your gamma saw, and then you can add a little bit of that moisture to the paint, and it just loosens it a little. Okay, that just makes it glide on the canvas a little better. Does everybody understand? Are there any questions? I prefer the typed questions because I can't hear very well, but
Does anybody else want to check with pencil?
so now as you're going, obviously we'll have values that are not white, gray, or black. So you just look at the value that you're going to paint. For example, this value here is light gray, where this is more white. So I will just take a little bit of my white and a little bit of my gray, and I will make a light gray to go in that spot. Now you have to use your judgment with your eyes to get the right values for your picture. And they might look different than the person next to you because it's based on what they are seeing.
It's a nice way to put it, isn't it?
Yes, and don't worry about trying to paint the whole background. You don't have to take the time to do that. You just want to put the values in the areas to figure out what your values are. I would. If anyone would like to show their paintings, that would be great, especially if you have a question, because I think any questions you guys have would be really beneficial to the rest of the group. Yeah, here come, let me see. Yeah, so you painted your background value. That's great. Now, if you would want to move on and paint value for this part, then you move on to that next. So you're so do you have your picture? This is the one you're doing? Okay. So then I always go back to front, but it's up to you. Which part do you want to paint next?
But what she's asking if you go all the way to again.
Okay, so you're just painting, you're painting the picture.
So I did my light right on my inside it.
Yes. Yep, you're inside it. Now, this is a little bit darker. This is a little bit lighter. So you're just kind of adjusting your colors little by little as you go. So you just look at a part of the picture and try to paint that value. So if you get it on there and you're like, oh, that looks too dark, just add a little more white and lighten it up. Okay.
So up in here where the grapes are, you can do the background first. Put the one on top. Is that what you're looking at?
So this picture is printed pretty dark. Let me show you my example.
You can don't have to go clear up and around. I can put that
Right.
black in here and then highlight it, right?
You can, yes. That is one way to do it. So I did mine lighter. That's just based on my printout was different. I was looking at it differently. You're more than welcome to follow this and do it that dark if you'd like. So you, yeah. So you just look at a part, whether it's the hair or whatever, you just are trying to match the gray. Okay. Now, don't worry if it doesn't work out so much this time. It's totally fine. The point of this, The point of this is practice and trying to see value. Now, the reason that we can, like, if we don't finish or whatever, it's fine. It's because we have this. We have things to look at. But I do want you to try to see the value and try to match your colors with the value. Okay, that's the goal of doing this. Okay. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. My picture.
And that's okay because, again, your final drawing, the one that you're taking home and working on, that's the one that's going to be on the final canvas. This one is just practice. It's just practice to try to figure out the values and practice with the brush. Okay? Because, yeah. Yes. Yeah. You want to be careful not to use too much of the Gamma Salt just because it can get really, really thin and you don't, you still want it to be oil paint. But it does make it a little bit looser and glide and blend better. And that's part of this exercise is you want to make sure that you're trying your brushes and that you're trying those mixing things. It just is going to get you used to it because I can't like teach you exactly how that's going to go because it feels different for everybody. That's kind of an inherent thing that it just comes from practice. So that's what this is practice. Okay.
So my fruit is advanced, but I'll be able to.
Yes. Oil paint dries very slowly, and that is very helpful. You sure can. Yeah. We can put it on this. I have it on the slideshow. So we can put it on there so everyone can see.
Yeah. This is not good. I'm getting just the wording so I know how to help people.
Yeah. So we're just showing these versions on the big screen. So if you feel like it's easier to see that, you can. Sometimes. Oh. Okay, so sometimes, especially starting out, sometimes it's easier when someone else has simplified it for you. So there's that to look at if you'd like. Now, you don't have to expect your painting to be as refined as these examples. I just want you to try to do your best so that you get good experience with your paintbrushes and experiment a little. Try using some smaller ones and try using the rounded one and just kind of see and feel the difference.
I have two.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you hear people say that all the time. Oh, I'm pushing paint today. Like you're just taking. I like to start with base colors or base values because we're doing black and white. And from there, you just kind of add and tweak, and sometimes they even mix on the canvas. You just adjust, and make it how you want. Okay, Alpine. If anyone has theirs that they want to show or share or ask a question, that would be great. If you don't want to show, you don't have to. But if you want feedback from me, I have to see it. Okay. I'm going to try really hard to hear you. That's
Here's
looking
Paula.
great. Good too.
Paula. Yeah.
Great. Now, do you have a question?
Yeah, we want to know how to transition between like the darker and the lighter gray and make it look normal, not so abrupt.
Okay, so there's several ways you can do that. So one way is just putting your paint. So like say I have, oh yeah, sorry, I gotta switch the screen. So say I have a value here and I have my different value here. I need to get a little more paint on mine. Just having the wet paint and kind of going over that transition will blend it. Did you see that? So I'll put some black here that's a little more visible. So if you put it side by side and then you just kind of brush over that edge, and you kind of have to work back and forth, but it will change. It looks a lot darker on the screen, I'm sorry. Another way is if you have two values side by side, you can take a clean dry brush. So I have this brush that I haven't used, and a clean dry brush will blend that edge also. A little less than the other way. So depending on what you need. So like in your situation, if you want to add some lighter on it, now it's a little bit harder to lighten up dark colors on the canvas. So if you want to make that a little lighter, I would take a little bit of just straight white, add it on top, just a little bit, and then you can blend it in with another brush or with the brush that you have, and that will lighten it a lot because it will just kind of mix together on the canvas and make your lighter value. It's using the dark that's already there. It's kind of hard to see, but it did actually lighten. I hope that answered your question. Okay. Okay, Cokeville, does any of you guys have any questions? Or want to show us your beautiful artwork? Is that a no? Okay. Okay. Okay, Richard, I see that you're showing. I just need to, there, and I can see it. It's looking great. I can see that little painting right there. Good, I love to see the different values. Good. Good, yeah. Now after you do that background color, start moving in and doing the values for the other parts of the painting as well. Good.
more serious than I do. So I can tell all of you take art a lot more serious than I do.
Yeah, that's a good point. So Melissa here, Missy here brought up a good point. It is easier to make light colors darker than dark colors lighter. So if you're in doubt when you're painting something, paint it a little bit lighter than you think first, because you can adjust it to be darker versus making it too dark and having to make it lighter, because it's just harder to lighten up dark colors. Very good. Okay, good. Thank you, Richard. Yes.
I'm supposed to do the thing.
It's probably not a big deal.
Whatever. Let's see. No, it's horrible.
You're talking about the lines or
Yeah.
the.
Yeah, as I was brushing around, I
I
thought
now. That's your.
trying to blend it and everything.
Were you using this brush?
Yeah.
So that's just because of the shape of the brush.
Okay.
So that's going to make more hard edges. So when you brush on, you're going to get those lines.
Okay. So
So
that's why you go to like
a rounder brush,
to
which
blend, or...
yeah, it will make softer edges. It will. You might find that shape too. You just got to have a light touch to blend that out,
Okay.
because that will happen.
So this
Especially.
has paint on the brush, pretty much.
Not so
I
much.
had more on the white.
Yeah, it's
But
not
that
so
was
much.
all going together with this square brush.
Yeah.
I found I had to go to the round brush, kind of get the white where I wanted it.
Exactly.
And if I go with the little one, I'm not putting enough paint.
Yeah, so I'm liking that because you're feeling the difference of what they're doing. And in different situations, you'll use a different brush, right, for what you need. So just getting used to that. And if you're seeing those edges, light touch, blend them out. You just kind of have to figure out how to make it behave the way you want it to. Yeah.
Didn't your husband do a class there at your shop? Or did he do it somewhere else?
We do, they do at the gallery.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a couple of gals come in and do different classes. So,
Yeah, I tried to sign up for one. I afford those ones.
yeah, she's a little.
Shane, did any of you guys want to show or ask questions?
Actually, no, it's crazy. We're supposed to do the
We
inside
have-
of this.
Yeah. 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 Okay.
We had a gal come in. Both of the instructors that have come. There's a guy that delivers propane. I don't know his name. Starts with the J, I think Justin.
Okay, so as you guys are working, excuse me, as you guys are working, I just want to kind of go over the steps that we've learned for painting process so far. So when you start a painting, the first thing you would do after you pick your subject is you'd plan your composition. That's kind of what we talked about at the beginning today. You decide how you want it arranged on your canvas, both with just the drawing and with the values. Then you would draw your picture really well. Then you will figure out your values to make sure that everything looks correct. Now, in my own work, at this point, I figure out my values really quickly. I use just little sketches. A lot of times I'll use gray markers to figure it out, just because that's what's fast and works for me. If you need practice painting, I highly recommend painting your value studies. So those are the steps that we have so far. Plan your composition, draw your composition, figure out your values. So that's steps 1, 2, and 3 of creating a painting.
Beautiful. There is a gal that does oil painting that came into our gallery, and she's part of the art association over in,
If anyone has any questions while you're working, feel free to type them. We'll keep our eyes on the chat.
Bring your own supplies. On Thursday night.
Okay, so the question is, how do you get crisp lines? Now, to see the difference, that's one going to be a value thing, a contrast of value will make a crisp line, and your square brush. So, so on my little painting here, if I want to have this be a crisp line, so first I want this to be not quite white, but a little bit lighter. So I'm just gonna mix me a little color to use. So I'm using my square brush. So if you see, I rub it in the paint and then I kind of fix up that square so it's nice and ready to use. And if I just go down, so I'm showing this edge of this. You see how that kind of creates a nice crisp edge.
You're related to Coral Sanderson?
So this is a line on this paintbrush, and that will, depending on how you pull it, you just have to use that edge to create your chiseled line. It depends, but oftentimes I'll just do one because, I'm right-handed and that's the side I mostly use. So a lot of times I'll just load the one edge.
Yes. Yeah, she's great. She's an amazing woman. She's an amazing quilter.
Oh, yes.
Oh my gosh.
Did that work? Good.
I'm almost ashamed to say. I think it was 2 years ago in the fall.
Hey, Thane, could you please mute your audio?
What?
We can just hear you. Would you mind muting?
Muting. They weren't muted. Oh, us? Yeah. I thought we were muted. I thought we were still.
You're not.
She probably doesn't mind this.
Sorry.
It's fine, don't worry. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Probably here. So I want to show how we're going to store the paint stuff. Actually, let's just set it here. I don't know that I need to necessarily show that part as much as what's here. Okay. I did it this Go to this view. Am I on mute? Okay. All right. So for the last thing that I want to show you guys as you're finishing up is we need to be able to clean our brushes and stuff properly. So I take my Gamma saw. I think they'll be able to understand. So even if you're not quite done yet, that's okay. Just take the paint out of the brush. When oil paint dries, it's really hard. Now it's okay that your Gamma saw is turning colors. That's totally fine. So you can look and you can see there's still some in my brush, so I need to rub it some more. So step one, get all that paint out of your brush. And that will take a little bit of work to get it out. Now there are different painting supplies where it has like a metal coil in the bottom that you can scrape it against. So if you ever do more oil painting, that's something that's helpful. So kind of rub that in, get it out. Now I'll just take a clean paper towel and I'm going to dry it off. And then you're not done yet. The next thing you need to do is you need to take this soap. You can use dish soap or whatever. I just put a little bit on my fingers. Oh, let me see if it's open. It's not open yet. Okay, I'm just opening up the soap. I think so. I'm really close. There we go. I got it. Yes. Okay. So make sure your soap is open. So I just put a little bit on my fingers and I just massage it in. I want to kind of make sure I'm getting it in there. I don't want any oil paint residue left because I want my brush to stay nice and soft. Because the better your brush is, the better it will paint. I'm working that in. Then once you've worked it in really good, you just wash it out with hot water, get all that soap out. And then before you let it dry, just kind of use your fingers and reshape it so it will dry in its nice original shape. The more you take care of your brushes, the better. Okay? And then, I gotta rinse off my fingers. Then you have your paint on your palette. So I learned a few years ago that you can freeze oil paint, which is a really great thing because oil paint is very expensive, and especially where we have our classes only once a week, this will get drier and more difficult to use. So what we do is you clean up your palette, use your razor blade if you need, or your palette knife. I'm going to kind of scrape off this stuff that I know will dry out. So just clean up your palette a bit. Then you're going to cover it with saran wrap, and we're going to put it and store it in the freezer. This way it's ready to use for next time. When we get to class, we can pull it out, and it just takes a few minutes, and it will be ready to go. And it saves so much money because you're not wasting paint. It's like $1 million idea. Does anybody have any questions about that? Oh, I just cleaned it up a little bit. I just you can use the razor blade or your palette knife, just clean it up so it's nice. And then we'll cover it with saran wrap and stick it in the freezer. Or outside, because that's freezing too. So there's no special, so because we have so much material to cover in a short time. We won't be working on this next week, but we will be painting again next week. So you'll get more practice. These little paintings are strictly for practice. If you don't get it done, that's okay. But because we have so many steps to cover, we're going to move on. So next week we'll be working with color. So there's not anything special with the saran wrap. You just want to make sure your paint's all covered so that it doesn't dry out. You just want it to be covered. So I just kind of take a piece that's about the size of my palette and wrap it around. Alpine, you said you have one to show. I would love to see it. Sorry, we're just getting it ready so we can see you. Oh, that looks great. Good job. Raise your hand if you painted that. Yay, good job. You did a great job with the values. That's exactly what we wanted. Thank you for sharing. I cannot find the end of this for the life of me. Perfect. Yeah. Hey, as you guys are cleaning up, if you think of a question, just let us know. You're welcome to type it in or whatever. And Richard, did you want to say anything or end anything before we go? And don't stress if you didn't get it all the way done today. We will be moving on next time, but this part is for practice. So don't worry, this isn't a finished painting today. It's practice and getting used to values and the brush. Yes, remember, make sure your lids are untight on your paint. If you have, paint over them and stuff, kind of try to keep things clean. It's much easier to take care of things the cleaner you can be. So. Yeah, so once you have the soap on them, you can use this hot water and rinse them out. Yeah.
And then you reshape.
And don't throw away the Gamasol that's in your jar. Just put the lid on tight on your jar because you will use that again next time. It's okay for it to get a bit dirty. It is usable for a while, even though it looks gray. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So these are like the base colors. And from there, you can adjust them. So like if I need a light gray, I'd take some of my middle and some of my light and just mix it together as I need it. because there's so many different ones, it's really difficult to have every little color mixed. So you just kind of have your base ones, and then you can just adjust them slightly to what you need. Does that make sense? Okay.
Do you have,
I don't personally clean them between, but I will have a paper towel close by, and I might just like, yeah. And then if I'm like really changing colors, then I might wash it out or switch brushes or something if it's like a huge color change. But generally, I just wipe it with a paper towel in between. It's not necessary to clean it after every little. What do you mean? Just this. Excuse me. The first time using paint is really intimidating because it's like, I don't know what I'm doing, but it's just that practice. It's just using the brushes, and it's like we talked about before, you just kind of have to figure out how to make it do what you want, you know? Yeah, I can bring one. Let's see. I can.
started with something easier like
See.
Does it sound like a baby?
No, I totally understand. If you think about it, though, the shapes are like a sphere. You can technically say the grapes are a sphere. So I would recommend just when you look at like a shape, just think don't see all the other details. Just try to see this is this color. Like this section is light gray, and just paint it. And it's okay if it doesn't have like all the details yet, because we add that later. So just focus on this section is light gray, this section is gray, this section is dark gray, this section is really dark. And just seeing those really basic differences, that will help your mind simplify it. And then it's easier to add the details on top later.
Okay. Okay, now what if it's drying like that?
Yeah, you just kind of like, yeah, and then it will dry and it'll be good. Uh-huh. Okay, that's a good question. How do we store the masterpieces? So they are wet, so putting them in the bag isn't a super great idea. Okay, so Missy says that each library should have a designated spot where people can set their canvases for them to be stored. So yeah, so ours are going on top of the bookshelves, so they're out of the way and they won't get messed up. So somewhere like that would be a good spot. Yeah, you want them open to air. You don't want them in a box. You don't want them on top of each other because they'll stick together. So they need to be separated. Great. No, I don't usually. Those really help. So in like transit and stuff, that they don't get bent and whatever. But I find that it doesn't do, for me, I don't feel like it does that much. So I try to shape them so they'll dry right, and then I just kind of let them. Yeah. So the little plastic covers that are on the paintbrushes, you don't have to put those back on. Those are more for like shipping and transit and stuff. So I usually just shape them to let them dry and stick them in, and they're usually just fine. Yeah. No, you did. So they'll kind of clump together because they're wet. But as you shape them the best that you can, and then they'll just dry, and they should keep their shape pretty well. No, no, it's totally fine. It's a good question. Okay. So what's wrong? Oh yeah. So that's
Clear away the dark.
so like
How would you
in
do
this
that? I'm
situation.
sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. So I would just take all this stuff that's like thin and spread out, just scrape it off, and then I might grab a paper towel, and so you just kind of wipe it off the razor blade when it gets full, and then now there's a little bit of residue on there, so then you can take your paper towel and just kind of scrub it off. And then
just
it's
leave it like
yeah,
that with
it's
the
it doesn't have to be perfect, just so it's kind of a fresh start for next time.
Can I show a not to do?
Sure.
You gotta keep your palette flat on the table.
Oh yes, we have a crack. I will admit some of mine have cracks at home too.
So just an FYI.
Yeah, yes. Be careful not to break your palette. So this, you'll just take the cling wrap and just wrap it around where your paint is so that it protects it.
And then we use regular water to wash this first.
So there's the soap, the soap's
I
right
got the
here,
soap.
and then we have a
So
bucket
I'll use the- oh,
right here. Mhm. Okay, so if there's not any more questions or anything, if you guys are done and cleaning up, you're welcome to go home for the night. Thank you, everybody. I hope this was a good experience. I know the first time painting can be a little intimidating, so don't worry. We will have more practice. Mhm. Yeah, I kind of spread my bristles and kind of really look in there.
kind of almost